Hello friend. I want to tell you about the BMW E90 car. Some people believe that the only true BMW is rear-wheel drive. When buying the 3 Series E90 model, it is worth adopting another one. If you want to buy a really good version, focus on 6-cylinder engines. The 5th generation of the BMW 3 Series debuted in 2005. We know it under the designation E90, the predecessor of the E46. However, to be more precise, it should be noted that E90 is the code for the sedan. The station wagon, touring, is E91, coupe E92, cabrio E93. These last two versions appeared on the market a year later. The facelift versions come from 2008, but a year earlier, new engines began to be introduced, which is of great importance especially for diesel buyers. Although the car was offered as standard in a rear-wheel drive version, you could get X-Drive 4-wheel drive for an additional fee. This is a simple, electronically controlled system of practically permanent 4x4, implemented by a clutch, not a central differential. The suspension is fully independent, multi-link axle at the rear, double wishbones at the front. The car offered electronically controlled shock absorbers with variable damping characteristics at an additional charge. Engines. The range of engines is very wide. Let's start with petrol cars. They can be divided into inline 4-cylinder and inline 6-cylinder. The V8 engine is available only in the sports version of the M3 and generates 420 HP. And this is not the subject of this film. The range is opened by the 316i model, powered by a 1.6 engine with 122 HP. Contrary to the designations, BMW did not offer a 1.8 engine. The 318i and 320i versions have a 2-liter engine with power from 129 to 170 HP under the hood, with the engine of the 320c version having a capacity of 2 cc larger and power of 173 HP. So in general, 3 4-cylinder units were used. The 6-cylinder engines also came in 3 versions and numerous power versions. The smallest, with a capacity of 2.5 liters, powered the 323i and 325i models. It generated from 177 to 218 horsepower. The 3-liter petrol engine came in 2 versions. The larger N52 and N53 powered the 325i, 328i and 330i versions. The power range was 218 to 272 horsepower. The slightly smaller N54, but turbocharged, was used exclusively in the 335i, with 306 horsepower. This model was the most dynamic in the range apart from the M3. It reaches 100 km per hour on average, depending on the year and variant, in 5.5s and easily accelerates to the limiter set at 250 km per hour. Diesels are similar to petrol engines, also a range of 4-cylinder, only 2.0, and 6-cylinder, only 3.0, engines. While the E90 model only used petrol engines from the N family, the diesels came from 2 different families. The M engines are an older generation, while the N is completely new in this model. Importantly, older diesels were installed even after the facelift, but only in 6-cylinder versions. The range of diesel engines in Troca is opened by the 316D model, powered by a more modern unit than the previous 318D version, which was the starting version. It reaches 116 hydrogen phosphide, while the 318D 122 HP. The latter and more powerful variant is powered by the older M47 unit. The newer engine was also designated in the same way 318D, but only since 2007. It has a power of 143 HP. The code 320D applies to both older and newer generation engines with power ranging from 150 HP to 184 HP. The 3.0 diesel is reserved for the 325D, 197 or 204 hydrogen phosphide, 330D, 231 or 245 hydrogen phosphide, and 335D. 286 hydrogen phosphide models. The latter variant, based on the older M57 engine, is equipped with 2 turbochargers, thanks to which the torque reaches 580 Nm, and acceleration to 100 is realized in 6 seconds. Interestingly, the slightly weaker 330D version, based on the new N57 engine, needs the same amount of time for such a sprint. It is worth adding that both versions were offered until 2012, i.e. almost simultaneously, although the 335D debuted 2 years earlier. Which engine to choose? This is a big dilemma in this model. Due to the great popularity of diesels, we will start with them. It would be necessary to do this by distinguishing between 2 generations of 4-cylinder engines. M47 is an old family known from the E46 model, which, although not without flaws, has gained a large group of supporters over the years. Its only factory defect is the fragile flaps in the intake manifold. Does not apply to 318D. Basically, the problem is that the flaps get dirty, their mechanism seizes, or even breaks off. Rarely, but still, a flap breaks off and is blown towards the cylinder. Depending on the size of the element, it stops on the valves or falls into the engine. The effects can be different, and in the worst case, it can destroy the drive unit. Of course, a way to solve the problem was found: eliminating the flaps. This is effective and does indeed eliminate the risk of failure, but the engine is no longer what it should be. Users praise this remedy method. Other shortcomings of this engine include accelerated wear of the dual-mass flywheel and pulleys. People who change the oil according to the computer's recommendations must also reckon with the fact that their turbocharger will not last as long as users who do it every 10 to 15,000 kilometers. Another, rather minor issue is the timing chain tensioner. It should be checked regularly, and if the chain is working with too much play, replaced. The issue is completely different in the newer N47 engine. Here, the timing drive used is not so much fragile as faulty, which often has to be replaced before the mileage of 100,000 kilometers. Usually it is the tensioner, less often the chain, and in very neglected cars also the gears. There is only one problem. The timing drive in the N47 engine has been moved to its rear, i.e. between the housing and the clutch. Unfortunately, this complicates, for example, checking the system. To do anything, the entire drive unit must be dismantled and the engine must be disconnected from the gearbox. The problem is that this requires a lot of work, so the costs are high. Labor costs will range from a few $100s in an independent garage to a few thousand in an authorized service. This is the only drawback of this engine, but it is so big that it calls into question the savings associated with its purchase. It is better to choose a 6-cylinder diesel. Interestingly, the timing drive moved to the rear in the N57 series was also used here, but it is not defective and users do not complain about it. The advantage of choosing a larger unit is that regardless of whether we choose the older M57 or the newer N57, we will always be satisfied. Of course, some repairs are very expensive. For example, replacing the timing drive even in the M57, or the injection system, but it is one of the best diesel engines in the world, characterized by a durability of 500–700,000 kilometers and better performance than the most powerful 4-cylinder BMW units. So if you want to buy a diesel, hunt for 6-cylinder engines. Of course, you can buy 2-liter M47, but the cars are older, up to 2007, and rather heavily used. We advise you not to get into newer ones. The situation is slightly better with 4-cylinder petrol engines. The 316i is an unpopular, weak version with a weak timing drive that can fail after 30 to 50,000 kilometers. Theoretically, the engine is not that bad, you just need to replace the tensioner when necessary, but buying this version makes no sense. It's better to choose at least the weaker 320i, with the exception of the rare 320c N45B20S engine. Each of them is a fairly good alternative for people who care about relative economy and don't need diesel. There are, however, a few minor issues that need to be fixed. For example, the coils in the N43 variant with direct injection. You also need to keep an eye on the timing tensioner in the slightly older N46, which doesn't cause as many problems as in diesels or the 1.6 engine, but it can still wear out earlier than the manufacturer predicts. One of the worst things that can happen is a failure of the injector or the variable valve timing system. Fuel consumption may be a problem, because this model is not economical, and there is basically no space for an LPG cylinder. BMW has completely abandoned the spare wheel, so the only option is to mount it in the trunk or in the floor after cutting a suitable hole. Both solutions significantly reduce the aesthetics, functionality and resale value of the car. That's why, in our opinion, if you're going to decide on a petrol, it's better to go all out and choose a 6-cylinder engine. Which one? It doesn't really matter, although valve lifter failures do occur in the N52. Users usually have problems with the fuel system, fuel pump or injectors, and carbon deposits and the ignition system, which most often affects the N53 units with direct injection. What's broken? If you choose the right drive unit, then basically the rest of the mechanisms should not be a cause for concern. Only automatic gearboxes, especially those working with powerful diesels, may fail over time. Regular oil changes provide a guarantee of long-term operation. Be wary of the X-Drive drive. It is indeed very good, but also exceptionally expensive to repair when one of the mechanisms wears out. If you want a car of this class with 4x4 drive, we recommend the Audi A4 B7 or B8 with the armored Quattro. The strong point of this model is its corrosion protection and overall build quality. Although in many cars you can see steamy headlights or slight corrosion in the chassis. The equipment depends on the individual configuration of the first customer. There are both poor and very rich versions on the market. The more electronics on board, the higher the probability of minor failures. The worst thing about the subject is cars after accidents. The suspension is durable, but quite expensive to repair, although not as expensive as in the Audi A4. In many examples, the steering gear already requires regeneration. Many users have given up on the standard run-flat tires. They are easier to buy and have a positive effect on driving comfort. Unfortunately, you have to reckon with the need to carry, at least, a repair kit. Is it worth buying? Of course, the 3 Series has many advantages, but you have to remember about the relatively high maintenance costs and low practicality. A lot depends on the choice of engine. BMW certainly offers better engines than Audi for the A4 in the same period of production, but when looking for a good, economical diesel, it is better to focus on Audi or Mercedes. True, the 2.0 TDI engine also had a mishap, but not every engine is defective. Another thing is that BMW has bigger diesel engines, better ones. If you buy an E90, it's best to buy one with an inline 6 under the hood. Thanks for listening to me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and rate my video. If you know of any problems with this car that I haven't mentioned, be sure to write about them in the comments.
I have good news for you. Now, if you are planning to buy a used car, or learn more about your car, you no longer need to search for the information you need on the internet. We have collected everything in one place for you, on the website carme.pro. Here you can find out everything about the car, what breaks and at what mileage, any problems with engines, chassis or gearboxes, which trim levels are better not to mess with and how not to lose money buying a used car. You will learn all this on carme.pro.